Hello, my name is Chelsea Lauder, and I'm the Community Engaged Teaching and Research Program Associate in the Office of City and Community Engagement at Northeastern. This narrated slideshow is part 2 of a 3-part series on community partnerships in service learning and community engagement. We will be covering topics related to building and maintaining partnerships that recognize power. Starting with an overview of identity, power, and positionality, we will then cover how power dynamics manifest within campus community partnerships, and we will also cover practical methods for maintaining these relationships. When hearing the word identity, many people immediately think of the physical markers that identify them to others. It's important to recognize that an individual's identity is not just made up of their physical characteristics, and someone's physical characteristics may not be in line with their personal and social identity. Identity markers go beyond race, gender, and nationality. Other examples include your education level, class, ethnicity, language abilities, ability status, and more. Having an understanding of your personal identity and also that others have layered identities is critical in building trust and understanding within your relationships. Your social identity is made up of many characteristics, internal and external, and it makes up how you view yourself and how others perceive you. The intersection of all these various characteristics and identities is what makes up your social location or positionality. There's both privilege and oppression associated with each identity. Oppression occurs on multiple levels, and for each identity marker, an individual could feel they both have privilege and experience oppression. This notion is better described through the term intersectionality. We all have intersectional identities, and that is what adds to the creation of our dynamic social positionalities. Each individual, with their complex and unique positionalities and social locations, experiences various power dynamics in relationships, some as the oppressor and some as the oppressed. In the context of campus community partnerships, these power dynamics play a huge role in building trust, the success of engagement, and the type of community impact created. For example, if a faculty member is culturally blind of the identity and context of their community partners and cannot adequately prepare their students for entering into a community partner could feel they are simply being used to enhance a student's learning rather than being viewed as a co-educator. This can occur on the reverse as well. Say a service learning course has primarily international students enrolled. The ways of communication, setting expectations, and onboarding students to your organization has to look different because the social identity of those students is different. As you may recall from looking at the SOFAR model, these university community partnerships are dynamic and have multiple stakeholders involved at any given time. These stakeholder groups aren't monoliths. Each engages and holds individuals with unique social positionalities. It's possible this feels a little overwhelming, and that's okay. Just as there's not a one-size-fits-all to service learning courses, there's not just one way to recognize and respectfully engage in partnership with people of different social locations. That said, it's extremely important to recognize the ways in which you have power and those where you may not. One way to better conceptualize this idea of having power in relationships is to look at these 3 different ways in which power is manifested. In a campus community partnership, the university has the visible power of setting which courses run. They make the decisions on the semester schedule, which students are enrolled in each course, and which faculty teach what courses. But in the same vein, community partner organizations have the visible power to decide what service roles are filled, what projects to work on each semester, and which students to work with. Visible power is the easiest to identify because it is the clear structure or framework being used in and for decision making. But the nuances behind those frameworks and the associated power with those nuances is this hidden power. This could look like faculty members who, while say they want to partner or be a co-educator, have already finalized their syllabus and are just looking to plug in partner names rather than partner thoughts and ideas. The invisible power is a little bit more insidious in that it is a social construct and established by ideals rather than systems and structures. An example of this type of power would be a student believing that a faculty member has more knowledge about a community than the members of the community themselves, because societal norms tell them that their faculty member is the resounding expert. And this is a key example why properly preparing students to enter a community or begin any level of community engagement is so critical. We talk about identity, power, and positionality because of the critical role it plays in our service learning and community engagement partnerships. As a community partner, a student leader, a student, or a faculty member, to engage in a relationship that recognizes power and the complexities of individual identities is to be contributing to building more ethical community partnerships. While the internal work of recognizing and assessing is important, it goes beyond just identifying your positionality and actually deciding how you are going to address this in your roles. This is a quote from one of our 2019-2020 faculty member fellows after participating in a workshop and conversation about identity and power and service learning with our Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion. And after this, she adapted some of those exercises and worked with her service learning teaching assistant to more critically address topics related to power and privilege in the classroom. As mentioned, it's important to move past just the recognizing of one's identity and power. We must now adapt our systems and structures to be reflective of this. I'm going to walk you through a number of methods for maintaining strong relationships through your SL course partnerships. We truly cannot say this enough. Communication is key in most relationships, but especially when working across the boundaries and roles in service learning. One thing to keep in mind here is that not all communication is meant to be instructional or logistical. In service learning partnerships, it's just as important to be a contributor in a conversation as a listener, and all members of the partnership should feel they have the agency to give direction and share thoughts and ideas, but then active listening should be a priority on all sides as well. The idea of engaging in shared assessment and reflection goes beyond just leading a singular reflection activity and providing feedback to one another. When we talk about reflection, we mean facilitating reflection activities that connect course content to student experiences and then to community goals and impact. But we also mean reflecting as an individual student leader or a faculty member and community partner, and reflecting together to examine that relationship itself. Conversations should make meaning of individual goals and experiences in relation to what the original shared goals were. Were those goals met? How did each person or group see their role in meeting said goal? These questions can be asked and answered through informal reflection, but also through formal assessment structures, whether it be utilizing the evaluation and assessment tools that our community engaged teaching and research team offer, or creating a system of your own. Having a shared assessment model that collects open and honest feedback should be a priority. Regardless of how much you communicate or feel as though you have set everything up for success, this work is not static. There are always moving pieces, and with that comes bumps in the road. Some level of conflict is likely, and problem solving will always be needed. When there are conflicts or challenges, it is important to revisit shared documents and records of what one another's goals and expectations are. Don't be afraid to engage in conversation about what is working and what's not. Oftentimes, people get hung up on being an email burden to the other, but without that conversation and open feedback happening on a regular basis, it's difficult to know if your partnerships are really meeting the goals you had wanted it to. Lastly, don't forget to engage with your students, faculty, community partners, and teaching assistants about more than just logistics. The richest relationships through service learning often come from individuals getting to know one another as a fellow human, rather than just someone who holds a specific role. Ask one another about their passions, their interests, their communities, and more. These individual and genuine connections are how these professional partnerships last. So there's a lot of information about building and maintaining your service learning relationships. Some of it may be new information, and other pieces could just be reinforcing what you had already suspected. And having this understanding on both a micro individual level, as well as in terms of your positions and relationships, is critical in building responsible and ethical partnerships. The information we talked about today was pulled primarily from these sources. If you have any questions about the topics covered or would like to access any additional resources, please email us and we will pass them along.